Low-level encounters in games such as Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder 2nd Edition have some of the highest potential to become some of the most memorable moments in your campaign. So I thought I'd make a quick video highlighting 3 simple concepts in which you can turn your low-level encounters into these memorable moments. These concepts are incredibly easy, so let's get right into them. The first concept I want to cover is probably the simplest and the easiest, and that is how to use terrain to make, exciting combats. The entire importance of terrain really lies on one thing: giving your players ability to make more choices. And I will explain and I'll show an example of what I mean. Let's go to a forest. I have run mini campaigns and played in mini campaigns, and pretty much every campaign I have played in or ran, within the first 3 levels, a combat has occurred in a forest. So right now in this scenario, we have a fighter and a carved beast. A carved beast is this cool Pathfinder 2nd Edition monster that is a wood elemental carved to look like a animal, and it takes on the wits and brains of an animal. It is like a tree animal. It's very cool. On this map, there is a couple trees, some grass, and when it is the fighter's turn, they really have one simple thing they're going to do. They're going to run at that beast and attack it. They don't really have that many choices to make. I mean, they do, but why would they make any other choice? Now, let's take that same scenario, that same forest location, and add some interesting terrain to it. Let's add a river that now is going across the battle map. Along with that, add shrubbery and trees and vines and rocks. Now, our fighter, it is their turn. They see the carved beast, same distance away, but now they have to start asking themselves questions. Do they want to run across these rapids? What happens if they, fall over? Do they want to lure that creature into the rapids? Do they maybe want to loop around and try to cross the tree trunk? Do they want to use the environment to their benefit? Now, when it is the fighter's turn, they have to make a choice. They are going to be more engaged in that combat, and they are going to start thinking about, okay, what is my character going to do? Are they a character who will just run through the rapids and attack a carved beast, which is the same as the first example I was showing you, but it is now a character choice? Are they someone who will run through the rapids? Are they a character who would try to think more strategically and go around and climb a tree trunk? So like I said, the importance of terrain is to give your players the ability to make choices. A quick side note before we get into the next 2 concepts, all these maps I'm using and showing today are first of all free on my Patreon, so if you want to use them in your games, go ahead and grab them. I created them using Dungeon Draft, and all the assets pretty much you are seeing here, other than the basic Dungeon Draft assets, are from Crosshead Studio. All that stuff down in the description down below if you want to check it out for yourself. Along with that, all these maps I show you, all these concepts I talk about, these can all be done in theater of the mind, using a whiteboard, using paper and pen. Just because I have made pretty maps does not mean you have to make pretty maps to still use all these concepts. And I'm not gonna lie, a lot of my campaigns are still just drawn up on a whiteboard, and they're still equally as fun. Okay, on to the next concept. Now, the second concept I want to talk about is another easy one, and that is how to use time to create more drama and intensity in encounters that might not be that intense. And for this example, I take us to the sewers of a town that has been overrun by zombies. Your party is trying to make their way through these sewers to escape said town to, get to salvation. Now, you can run this encounter in 2 ways. The party runs into this hideout, there's a bunch of zombies, and they just have to beat a bunch of zombies and then they can leave. Or you can make this encounter more intense, more dramatic, more thrilling by adding a time limit to it. And when I say that, let me tell you what I mean. So, your party ends up in this hideout in the sewers. Someone's been living here. Instead of saying okay, you run into a bunch of zombies, fight them, you then say, okay, you are on this side of the battle map, you have to figure out how to get out of this hideout in 4 rounds. After those 4 rounds, there are going to be a lot more zombies flooding in through these pipes and through these entrances and exits, and you are going to have to deal with a more dangerous situation in which you are completely surrounded. Now, when I do time limits, I do want to add here, there are never time limits in which, like, okay, after 4 rounds, if you don't complete this objective, if you will, you all die. I don't like doing that. But what you can do is like, okay, 4 rounds or 5 rounds, if you are not able to get from this side of the battle map to this side, something very, very dramatic is going to happen. And you know, the entire situation is going to become very, very risky. And what that does is it makes a very basic encounter against zombies, which can be very boring. Some of my least favorite fights are against zombies because it's just like, okay, keep hitting them until they fall over and over again. It makes that encounter way more dramatic. How are they going to navigate this terrain now? Going back to the first concept, what kind of choices are they going to make? Are they going to stay together? Are they going to split up? What happens if the druid gets grabbed and there's only 2 rounds left? Who's going to move the bookcases out of the way? It becomes an encounter that is way more about just defeating the zombies, but it becomes an encounter about surviving. And that is how you can use time. This is just a simple example of how you can use time. You can really do it for anything. The stakes don't even have to be that high. You can always just put some type of time limit onto your encounter in which things are going to get worse. Now, the third and final concept I kind of already hinted at in the second concept, and that is making your combats not solely about defeating the monsters, which can be a little tricky. When we're playing games like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder, these more traditional games, they are rule sets that are built off of combat. Most of the ways that your players mechanically interact with the world with their class abilities or their magic items are most likely going to be in the realm of combat. So when you make defeating the monster not the main objective to an encounter, it makes them think more creatively. It makes them think of all the choices that they have to make. For this last example, I take us to a tavern just after midnight. The party is sitting down for food and drink. Maybe it's the same party who just escaped those zombies. They're having a bad day and it's about to get worse. And they have began to interact with this little old lady who owns the tavern. Outside, the clouds part and a full moon is revealed, prompting that old lady to turn into a werewolf. They now find themselves in a tavern where a werewolf is rampaging. There's a bunch of citizens, and they themselves do not know how to deal with a werewolf, seeing that a werewolf usually has immunities and resistances to all type of damage that isn't usually like silver or, you know, something else. Drawing a blank right now, I'm gonna be honest. With that in mind, your players can't just directly fight this creature. They have to start thinking creatively. They have to start making choices, just like the first 2 concepts we thought about. Do they first start by saving all the citizens? Do they try to trap the werewolf in a kitchen? Does the mage or the wizard or the investigator of the group start researching ways to stop a werewolf? It begins to become this conversation in which it's not like, okay, I'm going to go beat this werewolf. It's like, okay, someone's gonna go try to like restrain the werewolf. Other people are going to try to, you know, get people out of the tavern. By making the monster more difficult to just single-handedly defeat, it makes your players make choices. It also makes the objective not to just defeat the creature because they might not be able to. It makes the objective then, okay, survive, save the citizens, whatever the party wants it to be. And it is a concept that if you can nail down this idea that the objective should be not about defeating the monster, that will make your combats and encounters more interesting. And it doesn't always have to be a monster that is unbeatable or very hard to beat. It can always be something like, okay, the warlock is ritual. You have 5 turns, going back to the time thing, to defeat them. You can destroy the crystals and the crystals will stop the ritual, or you can fight the warlock, but the warlock has a bunch of minions. By adding these secondary objectives and objectives that aren't just go and defeat the evil warlock, you're going to give your players more interesting choices, and that is going to make it more memorable. And yeah, I hope those concepts help. This is a new series I want to do. I really like creating encounters. I really like monsters. If you've ever seen any of my other stuff, I'm usually talking about monsters, and now I want to talk about encounters. This is the first of many in this series, so if you have any feedback, please let me know. This is one of my first longer form videos. Along with that, if there are any encounters you would like me to try to cover and break down, or any questions or anything like that, also please hit me up in the comments, and I will try to answer them or even make a video about them. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and be excellent to each other.